Hello there. This is Mr. D. This is one of my Bible recordings, and it has to do with something that happened in my life also. It probably happens more than we realize in all of our lives, but this part of the Bible refers to a place called Holy Ground. And in Exodus 3:5, it talks about how Moses was told to take off his sandals, and he was told that the ground was holy, meaning that the ground by this so-called image, either God or an angel or whatever it is from heaven, was trying to tell Moses that the ground was holy. That was important. I mean, I understand that the presence of God or seeing God in the Bible means you die. I don't know if that's true. I have never seen God, and God's never given an image to me. But I can imagine that the power of God and the purity of his holiness may have some bearing on our flimsy little bodies. But he told Moses the ground was holy. Another place that is mentioned about holy ground outside of Exodus is a place in, I believe I wrote down, Acts 7:33. And I believe it was Joshua was approached by an angel of God. And that angel of God said, take off your sandals, because the ground is holy. So is that ground holy too? So I would say that God's trying to tell us the presence of his being, his property. Like if he owned us or a church or something like that, I would assume that that means that the ground that is at that church is holy. And around us is holy if we're carrying the character of Jesus in our heart. The power, like the prophets had, to heal and bring people back from the dead. I would say that holy is very important when the power of God's around, which that brings us me to this story. Yes, a few years back, not too long ago, but a few years back, when my wife was in operation with her Sabbath school class here in the Valley. We'd had that class for a little over 20 years at the same church. A lot of children. I kept an inventory I still have. And sometimes we did 100. Can you believe 100 different kids that would come to our home church? I don't know what it was about my wife's craft class, her Sabbath craft class, but it brought kids, usually 30, 40 kids, not uncommon to see. I mean, it was beautiful. Well, a time came with pastors changing, and the world around you changes because people become in power that weren't in power before, and some people become envious of what you're doing, and children are running around bumping into elderly people and knocking them over. Well, something had to be done. And normally my wife is the kind of person that when she said stop, because we've been there for a long time, almost 3 generations, almost 30 years we've been there. And I said, stop. The kids stop because they're like my children, Mr. D and his academy. They're God's children. They're God's children. And if you're holding God in your heart, then you have no problem with those children, just like I do with the academy. And my wife did with her Sabbath school. Well, this was going on for a while until I said, kids were getting kind of out of while, and they're getting older, and they're getting kind of rambunctious. You know how kids can be, and running in the church, and the director, I mean not directors, deacons and elders, they really weren't policing, and they were allowing the children to do whatever they please. Well, my wife went to the pastor, like a good follower of the church. She went to the pastor and she said something to the pastor, and it was out in the middle of the lobby. And the pastor said, leave it alone, that he'll take care of it. And my wife says, well, he's knocking over people and elderly people. And he says, don't worry. So then I'll talk to the parents. Now you got to remember, some of these parents were children. My wife went through 3 generations there in Sun City of youth to adults to children. So a lot of these grown people that she's going to talk to about the little ones running around were kids that were in her class when they were young. So they know my wife very, very, very well. Still do in that church, even though she hasn't been there, unfortunately, for a while. But back to the story. Well, the pastor said, you can't do that. My wife got so upset, very emotional. She gets very emotional. She's a very emotional person, not like myself. At least back then, I was more colder. You know how guys are. So she goes home very upset. And then later in the week, she says, we're going back to church. And I says, what do you mean we're going back to church? And she said, yeah, God talked to me, in which I believe God did talk to my wife, or does talk to my wife. My wife is not deceased. She's still alive. And I believe that her relationship with God, just like each one of us relationship with God, can be very unique and very powerful at times, I believe, as emotional as we can get. She came back and she told me, I want you to make a little sign. And I did, which unfortunately, it's been a few years back. I don't remember where I put a sign or whatever, but the sign was taken on Exodus 3:5. And I stated that her class was holy and you need to take off your sandals. Now, the kids bought into this. Some adults said, I don't understand what holiness means. And they learned from that passage, along with the passage that was given to Joshua. And I hope I got the name. I didn't read the whole chapter of, what was it in? I didn't read the whole chapter of Joshua. So I assume it was Joshua. So, excuse me, I was looking at my Bible. So she wanted me to put this sign up. I did. The kids came. We argued with them and it started. And every one of the kids bought into it, even the teenagers. Because whenever you came into her class, there was lots of kids. I got pictures I can't believe. It's like the whole church fits into her room. And they take their shoes off. They all pray together. They all have class together, and they leave and they get their shoes on, except my wife. My wife didn't wear shoes in the Holy Temple Art Church. And kids asked her why. And she said, this is holy ground. Well, to leave it up to what happened, one of the girls that was running around knocking over elderly people in the church came to my wife. We'd known her since she was a baby, sweet girl. She's grown now. I think. I don't know how old. She's in her 20s, I know for sure. And she came to my wife and she said, you're saying that this was holy ground. And what you say what Moses had? Says, yes. I says, okay, if it's holy ground, then does that mean that, and this room is holy, does that mean this church is holy? And she'd say, yes. Does that mean the parking lot's holy? She'd say, yes. This girl, this wonderful girl, realized that what God had around her was his, and she wanted to be part of it. And she asked to be baptized. It was an amazing draw what it does in children when you bring God face to face with them. Now, I was rebutted to come up with this Exodus 3:5 because I had people say that Mount Sinai, where the commandments and where Moses was supposed to have had this experience with God, was considered holy. So I guess a holy mountain, Sinai is a holy mountain. Well, I could buy into that. But when I read the scripture that was in Joshua, what happened outside of Jericho before the fall of the walls, that was the same comment that God made to Moses, and he's making it to another follower, which means the ground that we are walking on is his, and we are to get on our knees and give reverence. With that power, I believe we can do anything if we accept the fact that God is in control. Well, that went very well for a while until one member of the church, unfortunately, found it to be annoying for children to take their shoes off, not understanding the ramification of what was going on. All I have to say is when the pastor came the next time, he wanted her to take and have all the kids put their shoes on. And she said she didn't care the kids could wear shoes, but she wasn't going to wear any. The confrontation with that pastor was so emotional that it caused my wife not to go back to that church because of an important thing we all need to learn. And I have learned, and I do it now with all my videos. And that is when God tells you something to do, do it. Don't push it off to the side. Don't be like the one that went into the well because he was running away. Don't be afraid because God's in control. I look at it now is that at my age, I'm going to be 71 soon. I look at the fact that I'm kind of old for this. But you know what? I hope that these videos bring youth closer to the understanding that Jesus is with us every minute of the day. I pray that we all realize and take off our shoes because the ground is holy that we stand on with Jesus in our life. Jesus makes the ground holy. Jesus brings life to us. Satan, just tell Satan to get out of the way. Well, I wanted to share the fact about what my opinion was of holy ground. I do think that all of us need to remember when we go into a church or any place dedicated for God, that we definitely should treat that as holy. But I have that extra that I added, the extra that my wife tried to share with everybody, that God is with you everywhere. So does that mean the whole world is holy? God bless you. This is Mr. D, and I'm trying to figure out how to add to the end of my videos a little SERP, but I'll tell you right now, don't forget to hit the little subscribe button, and that way you can be notified when I come out with another video. I don't know how often God has me do this, but I think it's going to be more often. You take care. As I said, God bless, Mr. D.